Active duty service members, veterans, family members, thank you for your service. And thank you for listening to Return to Roots Mil2Vet Resource Podcast, where we document our shared experiences, stories, and transitioning and reintegrating from the military to the community. Hosted by two transitioning service members, myself, Chris Elder, and my partner in crime, Jonathan Hernandez. For more information, go to mil2vet.com. If you have little ears, ensure you listen to the content before you allow them to listen. And if you are in crisis and homelessness, suicide ideations, or incarceration, dial 211 Courage to Call for assistance. Now, stand by for the sound of freedom.
Return to Roots. Tonight, we will have Jesse Kendrick. He is a fantabulous wealth of knowledge with a lot of experience when it comes to the transition and also with the challenges that you will be facing through before and after your process. So please stick around and listen to the show.
I think it's a process that lasts a long time. You know, you spend most of your adult life getting programmed in the ways of the military. That unprogramming, you know, it takes a while. It takes a while. So transition is an ongoing thing from, you know, the day that you decide to, you know, hang it up, probably until the day that you know, get put in the dirt and you get 6 feet under. I think it's just, you know, I think it's just that long of a thing, you know, when you dedicate your life to something, and then choose to stop doing it, or, you know, you hit your higher tenure, even though those are kind of suspended right now. I think it's an ongoing process, something that you got to work at a little bit every day.
So you feel like you haven't transitioned yet?
Oh, not completely. No, I mean, you know, when you look at our friend Maurice, you know, there's a reason that they, you know, call that reboot, you know, because you basically have to get reprogrammed. And if you're not working with a program like his and you're just kind of out in the ether like I am, it takes a little bit longer.
That's fair. That's fair. And it's crazy, man, because I just went through a class and it's called for business continuity, right? And honestly, had I not gone through the whole process that I've gone through so far, I would have never even thought about that. Like, seriously, my mindset was straight up just, oh, I'm gonna do something aviation, right? And then because you're so focused, that's fine. We're just so focused on what we know, and we really don't know 90% of the other stuff, right? We got that one little sliver, and you know, just working with you, and getting to know that and getting to all that exposure, that like changed a lot of mindsets, right? Even just getting to know what's her name, Amy.
Oh yeah.
That whole experience set a lot of things just in motion that I never thought were a part of things, right? And then that opened the door with you, with Overwatch, and then that set that whole training, you know, down one road, learning all of those things, and then now here, you know what I mean? It's just crazy.
Yeah,
So.
life is wild. But I'm a recently transitioned service member out of the Navy. I was a Navy chief when I went to the other side. Spent just shy of 21 years in. Was an aviation guy, an air crewman. Lots of hours flying the P3, P8, MQ4 Triton, which is the big UAV. And I've been out for just over a year now, into my or should I say back into my civilian life. So wanted to talk with y'all today about, preparation for transition and just kind of my journey. As I said at the beginning, every transition is going to be different, right? Nobody's is going to be the same. Everybody has different circumstances, different family, dynamics. You might have young kids, you might have kids that are already graduated. So there's so much information out there. Choosing your path is kind of like that old book, Choose Your Own Adventure, right? And there's no right or wrong way to do it, per se. I mean, there's definitely some stuff that if you don't do, you're not going to be successful. But, the biggest thing that I did that I think helped me was I started making moves about 24 months out from the date that I chose. And actually, my date was a little bit beyond what I actually got out for. And what I mean by that is being a detailer in the Navy, you kind of get to learn the ins and outs of how all the dates work and contracts work and everything. So I knew that if I had less than 12 months remaining on my contract when I finished my set of detailing orders here in Millington, I would have more options. So I had 8 months left on my contract when I was due to rotate. And so that gave me some latitude to, choose to retire or go to the end of my contract. And in the Navy, you can choose to retire or enter the Fleet Reserve either at your PRD if you're over 20 or at your SEAOS, which is the end of your contract. And I was, just going through life thinking I was going to ride out that last 8 months here in Millington. And I'd seen other guys go to, different jobs over at the board, selection board, they just enter records or whatever. So I was kind of planning on that. But the big thing, and once again, this is an appropriate time frame to do this podcast, because the thing that really changed my mind about staying in the military was when Abbey Gate happened in Afghanistan. I'd spent time in those theaters and, in places where I felt that we shouldn't have exited the way that we did. So when that happened, that just sealed the deal for me. I knew I was going to get out, and I thought I was going to just ride it out to the end of my contract. And then I fell in with a company that, had a good mission, and started contracting with them. And kind of made my decision when I went to a conference they hosted, and, called my wife and said, hey, I'm going to get out. That's when I really buckled down on the transition stuff. And the biggest thing, especially being an air crewman, and it's the same for a lot of different rates and a lot of different MOSs, is you basically just go through your career and you put little tiny band-aids on health things, right? Particular being an air crewman, I always had to have an upshit in order to fly and execute my mission. So, I would go to the doctor and tell them the bare minimum what was going on with me when I went for my annual flight physical. Absolutely made sure I was safe to fly, but there were some things that, I never addressed. So when I made the decision that I was going to get out, I was like, I'm going to go to medical and get seen for every little thing that I've been putting off. These headaches that I would get occasionally that were debilitating, I went and finally got seen for that. Different little things on my skin that potentially could have been, cancerous or whatever, that I never had checked because I didn't want to know the answer, right? So I went and got all that stuff checked. I did a second sleep study, because the first one they found that, I had sleep apnea, but it wasn't severe enough to warrant a CPAP. Well, that was 4 years before I separated. So obviously it had progressed, and I was like, well, I better get checked again. And then my grandfather, who was a Navy and Air Force veteran, had prostate cancer later in his life when he was, I think he was probably in his late 70s when that happened. But talking with my wife after I made the decision to transition, she's like, "Hey, you need to go get a colonoscopy." And I was like, "Well, nobody's looking forward to that, but let me talk to the doc." And thank goodness I had a good doc at the base here. And she's like, "Well, the Navy typically doesn't recommend that till you're 45. But since you've stated that you have a history of that in your family, I'll go ahead and sign off on it and you can go get it." So I got that done. Like I said, the biggest thing was just starting to take care of myself, right? Not that I hadn't done that, but I hadn't done it real effectively for 20 plus years. I was always focused on the mission and sailors that I served with and that I worked for and that worked for me. So I really kind of had to make a mindset change. Hey, you got to take care of yourself and make sure all this stuff's documented. So that was a big thing for me going through transition. And then, everybody goes through TAP at some point in some form, but TAP is just information delivery vehicle, right? It's not really meant to help you succeed. It's to give you all the tools to make transition, palatable, I guess is the word that I'll use. And the military has done a much better job with transition assistance in the past 5 years than it did the first 15 that I was in the military. Back when I first came in and was with my first unit, guys would get out and they, TAP was just like, here's some information. And, I think it was only like a 4-hour class back then, in the early 2000s. And guys would just get out and go on their way and then they would struggle a lot. And, vets still struggle even going through TAP and with all the resources that are out there. But it's programs like this that you and Chris put on and just kind of, sit down and have a talk and share stories that make a difference. And technology has helped out a lot with transition these days because you have so much information at your fingertips. But one thing that I always talked with veterans that I was helping after I got out of the military, and I still talk with them about, is you don't know what you don't know, right? If you don't know about a resource, it's pretty hard to find, right? So I've cobbled together, I don't know, I think my list is up to about 300 different support organizations that do various things. There's something as simple as an organization called Portraits for Patriots, right? Helps you get your headshot. Well, why is that important, you ask? Well, you got to start networking to get these jobs out there. So LinkedIn is currently the most powerful networking tool for a post-military career, in my opinion. So you get that headshot, you get that thrown up there, but they do that for free. That's photographers from around the country that volunteer their time, to help out veterans. And there's just so many other organizations out there that help. So it's just important to start early. And not everybody has that ability, I think right now we're in the situation where you see SkillsBridge. Everybody thinks SkillsBridge is like the be all end all if you're separating, right? Well, I look at it as it's like the shiny house on the hill. Yeah, it looks good and everything, but these commanders, these combatant commanders and commanders down to even the squadron and unit level, they can't let everybody that's separating go to SkillsBridge, right? They need to man their unit and man the ship, man the aircraft. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and think that you're going to transition and go right into SkillsBridge. There's so much flying around right now back and forth between all the services on changing, timelines, and the Navy, as usual, has done it by rank, right? Like if you're a junior guy, and I think it's great, you can use the full SkillsBridge. But if you're old fogies like me, you, and Chris, they've cut that down. They've cut that down. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and think SkillsBridge is the end all be all. It's not. It's not. And the program was designed to offer you the opportunity to check out something. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be employment at the end of that, even if you get a good SkillsBridge, right? So diversify would be one thing that I would say. Look at all your options, and then you got to network. You got to put yourself out there, and that's hard to do. When all you've known is, hey, I go in and get my. This is my daughter. Hi, I love you. Go downstairs, babe.
I love it. My children cut into the videos every once in a while too.
Oh yeah, good distractions. Good distractions.
Yeah, just like a cup of water, whenever you're like, oh, I need to take a drink of water whenever you're speaking, your kids come in and give you a little break.
Yep. Get you going.
I gave you some water.
Thank you. Go see mommy. She's down there.
Love it, man. I love it.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? Like, no matter what branch of the service you serve in, that it's going to come to an end, right? Even if higher tenure goes away like it has, they're going to say, hey, at some point, whether you serve 30 years or what, it's going to come to an end. So family's most important because they're the ones that are there for you beyond your service. So super important, and I'm super blessed to be able to wake up every day and see her off to school and go to her school plays and things like that. Those are things that I missed with my eldest son, who's now engineer. Graduated college. I've got a little bit of a gap between the two of them, as you can see, but I missed his entire life. He's 23, 24 this month. And I bet you throughout I was there for the first 3 years. And
Daddy, and
yes.
Did you know 3 and 3 make 5?
3 and 3 make 6, babe, not 5. All right, go see mommy, please. Okay.
It's been an adjustment for me as I just retired earlier this month.
I saw that, man. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks, brother. And it's one thing that's like, I'm not used to being home. So it's like I'm used to working in a military area, and I've been working from home for a while, and it's completely changed change of venue. I'm used to, I tell Airman Timmy to go take the trash out. Airman Timmy goes, takes out the trash. Here, I tell my son to take out the trash, and he starts giving me lip.
Yeah.
I
can't knife hand him, man. You want to, and you probably still do sometimes. I know I do, but yeah, you don't get the response that you do from Seaman Timmy when you do it.
It is an adjustment. I 100% right there next to you on that, man. It's something else, man.
It is. And I'll share a little bit about my exit from the Navy. Like I said earlier, I got sent here to Millington to be the detailer. You obviously have to screen to do that job, and it's an important job because you have a bunch of sailors to take care of. But I moved here with my family late 2019, right? So just follow that timeline. 2019, I get 6 months to get proficient at my job in the office there in the old cubicle farms at MPC. And, COVID rolls around March of 2020. They said, hey, take your computer, go home. We'll figure this out in a couple of weeks, slow the curve, whatever. I never went back to work till I retired. I mean, I had watch a few times, I probably only went to base, I don't know, 20 times in the last 2 years of my career. The rest of the time I was working from home. So I was well prepared to transition to a remote role when I got out. But I will tell you, after doing 2 years remote with the Navy from my house, and then a year of remote with the company that I transitioned with, that's 3 years of remote work. It kind of burned me out, man. Like it's tough because you don't know if you live where you work or work where you live. You're just, you wake up, thankfully there's a little bit of separation in my house. I have this upstairs bonus rec room that I've used for my office for the past 3 years. So I at least knew when I went upstairs, I was working, right? And the family knew when I went upstairs, I was working. But um, it was a change. And yeah, towards the end, I think I was struggling a little bit with, how do I motivate myself? How do I stay engaged? Um, so it's tough. It's tough. How's your transition going, man? How you feel? Pretty good?
It feels weird, man. So for those who probably don't know, I do real estate. So that's like totally, I have to be self-sufficient and run my own stuff. And it's not easy, man. It's hard. It's a lot of phone calls. It's a lot of no's. It's a lot of why are you calling me?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of unknowns. And really, every single morning, I have to pull out my little checklist that I made. Thank goodness I have that, going for me. I make a little checklist, and I'm like, the boxes aren't going to check themselves. So I got to go. I got to be my own self motivator. And if I don't make it, hey, I'm the only one that's going to hold myself accountable unless I'm working with a client. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's been difficult because then I have my wife who's working at the hospital, pulling extra hours here and there. And it's different trying to be a dad and working from home and not having the environment that I'm used to working in. And I'm like, I could do better, but I can't do any better because I'm also taking care of my kids at the same time. So it's been a true battle, man. It really has.
Well, you got to give yourself some grace, man, because that's another thing. Working from home. My wife works down in Memphis. So she got about a 45-minute commute each way. So she puts in an 8-hour day, and you throw in those almost 2 hours of commute on top of it. She's got a lot. So housework. Housework's the thing, right? Taking out the trash, doing the dishes, doing the laundry, especially when you have kids. So give yourself some grace, brother. It's not easy. It is not easy.
Yeah. And, just trying to come online with everything that my wife has managed while I'm away. Thank God I have a wife that stuck with me for 19 years, man.
Mm-hmm.
And she's incredibly efficient at what she's doing. I always tell her, I'm like, hey, you got to remember, you have 8 years of being a parent and running all this stuff. Me, I'm like, I was a part-time and now I'm trying to become a full-time.
Yep.
I'm still trying to pick up like, okay, well, I didn't even think about that. She's like, well, you need to think about that. I'm like, okay, I understand,
Yeah.
I understand I suck.
Just relearning, you're just rebooting and, getting into a new routine. And sometimes there's no new routine to get into. It's like you just get thrown into something, right? I tell people all the time, there's no instruction manual for adulting or for being a parent, right? These little human beings that you bring into this world, there's no instruction manual for that. You just do the best you can and, take care of them, nurture them. But at the same time, you got to nurture yourself too. And that's a tough thing for guys like us to do, I think, because, like I said, we're programmed, compartmentalize everything, put it in a little box in your head, put it on the back shelf, worry about the mission, go and execute. And, that's what we've done.
We are incredibly good at compartmentalizing things, especially those who've been around for a lot longer. And, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, the senior enlisted leaders and the senior officers that spend all this time caring for everyone else don't really get the time to take care of themselves. And then if you add the element like you were talking about, if you have any SF or if you have air crew or you're a pilot or anything that requires some kind of extra physical, Even us up on the flight deck, we don't want to tell the doc that we're hurting because then they'll remove us from flight deck duty.
Yep.
The avoidance of going to medical is such a big thing, and I know it kind of caught up to me. That's why I ended up finding myself out at 20 years versus 22.
Mm-hmm.
It just all of a sudden just caught up to me. And there's this Oxford study that was done in October of 2022, and it really kind of addressed how, at least for aviation, for the military, 72% of pilots admit that they avoid documenting their medical stuff.
Mm-hmm. I believe it.
That's staggering.
Mm-hmm.
They avoid it because they know if they say something, they're going to get pulled off. And we can't really afford to lose them, and they don't really want to be lost. So nobody ever says anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
And that's people could look that up. It's an Oxford study. So
with that, I remember specifically we were in Japan, and as I was going through my medical board process, right, one of my junior pilots, he came in and he was frantic because he needed to be fly worthy. He was not able to be fly worthy for 2 days, and that's because they weren't able to get his glasses, right? And we know how long that takes, right? Getting the glasses, they go from the United States to Japan. Japan, you get them, and then you get them back. And something that was kind of out of his control, and it wasn't him he was frantic because his commanding officer was very, barreling down on him about his airworthiness. And even though it was something that there were a couple of things that were piling up and that were affecting him, he was not able to communicate them because of the chain of command, right? And that put a lot of things into perspective with, wow, it's not just us enlisted. It's not just everyone puts their own unperceived or perceived pressure and somewhat direct pressure on, hey, you will be, for lack of better duties, you will be able to go on deployment. If not, you're a dirtbag. That is the automatic perception.
Yeah.
And it sucks because you do all of these things to try to get yourself to, we have that pride, every single one of us. And none of us want to be, we joined the military to be successful, to make something better out of our lives, to leave this legacy, right? And none of us want to be perceived as a dirtbag. Yet going to medical, no matter how serious it is, someone in your chain of command is going to perceive you as a dirtbag.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing that you're seeing right now is it's become more acceptable to be seen, but the problem is we don't have the manning. If we were fully manned as a military, as a Navy, it wouldn't be a big deal if somebody went down for medical reasons or, needed to be seen for some mental health stuff. But when you're sending ships out and squadrons out 80% manned, 90 if you're lucky, well, I don't think there's probably been a unit deployed at 100% for quite a while. I'm sure it does happen, but it's probably pretty rare. But yeah, so every person is important. But the thing that lacks on that leadership, on that commanding officer that you were talking about that was spooling up that young lieutenant, is, your EQ, your empathy quotient, right? The three of us here on this call, and Chris, I don't know you that well, but I've followed you for a while. I know just from following you and the fact that you're tied up with this yogi guy right here, that you have high EQ, and I have no doubt that you listened to your sailors and you took care of them and you really cared about what was going on in their life. I think that's one thing to celebrate with our new MCPON and these letters he's put out recently. It seems to be, for the three of us, that's just basic stuff. I think that's how we operated while we were in, is, we make sure that the sailor is okay, that his family's okay. But I think there was a lot of leadership that just didn't do that. And so MCPON said, well, I guess I'm going to memorialize it in these documents and put it out there. So I see it trending in the right direction, but once again, it comes back to manning, right? We're just not manned as a military like we should be. The recruiting problems, we're going to find out here because you remember the FY closes here in about 5-6 weeks, into September, and we'll see where those recruiting goals are. I know that we're going to be missing by quite a bit probably in the Navy. Navy always does creative math like they do. They'll adjust their goal at the end to make it look not so bad, but hey, got to do what you got to do. But it's a broader problem with society today in America is, people don't necessarily see the value of service to others or to the country. You'd think people would know more what's going on in the world with the advent of technology. But it seems to have almost made it worse, in my opinion, having access to all this information at any time. You'd think, oh, wow, everybody'd be more open and give people more grace, but it's just not happening. And you see that with the political divides in the country and different things. But, that's why when I went into the corporate world, everybody's like, oh, diversity. We want to recruit diversity. We want to have diverse teams. I'm like, that's all I've had for the past 20 years. That's just a natural thing that is built into us. It's like, okay, we have all different types of people in the military. And so diversity is an easy thing for you, I think, if you've ever served in any capacity in any branch of service. It's natural. So I think that's great strides that we've made in the past 30 years with getting to the place where we're at, where, we don't see a color, we don't see a religion, we don't see a political view. We're all just there to execute the mission. And so the Navy's just naturally diverse. And I'm happy to see that, women are able to serve on submarines now in special forces. And, I think that's important as long as you hold the standard the same.
It's the standard, like, absolutely. Anybody that can reach the height can ride the ride.
That's it.
Whether they hold on to their cookies on that ride is up to them.
Yep. I'm just waiting for that first female Navy SEAL to reveal herself.
Hell yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Hey, when it happens, man, that's fantastic, and that's going to be something that should be admired. Somebody that I would honestly let my daughter. I would say, hey, check out this person, first woman ever to be a SEAL. Hopefully my daughter would admire someone that did it, and that's
Absolutely.
one thing that you'll notice from a lot of us in the military, the majority of us. I'm not talking the old guard, but a lot of us that are in senior enlisted guys, we're all about, can you meet the mark? Then let's go.
Yep. Let's go. Ride the ride.
But we've seen some depreciation in that mark a little bit. And I get it that they're trying to recruit, but it's getting to a point where they're like, hey, we're going to lower the amount of push-ups you got to do, but not really tell them over here on the other side, hey, we messed up you're not going to get the same retirement that everybody else is going to get. Like, the recruiting tools that they used, they need to really reanalyze. In my humble opinion, this old retired guy's opinion, crusty old man now, right?
Well, I think we're pretty lucky, right? We got high 3 So, as long as you do 20, you get 50% of your base salary for the rest of your life. I mean, that's a big check,
Yeah.
every month. Pretty fortunate. There's not many industries or businesses that still do that. There's only a few that offer pensions. Government service obviously offers a pension. You don't get to collect it till you're 62. I'm 44. The eagle flies for me on the first of the month every month. you know, so that's pretty awesome. Does a military retirement take care of you and your family in the long term? That depends on how you've set up your finances. Me being a young sailor, I had a lot of fun. And that's one thing I tried to tell sailors that I worked with was, hey, set some goals, figure out what you want to do when you separate from service, whether that's one enlistment or 20 years, and then adjust appropriately, right? Like, you can't party all the time, and make all those goals that you set for 20 years come to fruition. So it's about balance, right?
Yeah.
I don't think everybody should be locked in their barracks room, or not ever go on MWR trips or go on vacation. But you can't go max on one side and then expect the other side to not be out of balance. So
That's where I felt when I was in. I was always like, man, I wish the Navy would teach more financial independence classes. Man, I wish this would happen. But there was just a point in time when I realized I am the Navy. So I need to start talking to my junior sailors about this.
mhm.
Like, I need to start teaching them stuff. Even the kid that just joined the Navy and barely knows how to make his own rack only because they beat it into him in boot camp.
Mhm.
He he needs to know how to think long term with that kind of mindset, because it's not taught in our society.
No, they
And
don't
if
teach that stuff in school, which is a tragedy.
you're not lucky and have parents that teach you that, who else is going to teach you? Well, that's where us, the senior enlisted guys and officers, I know a couple actually really good officers that literally have classes to just sit down and say, these are all the different things. You need to choose something, but you need to do something. And there's this one really cool blog that I really want to put out there. It's called Grumpus Maximus.
Grumpus Maximus?
Yeah, Grumpus
Okay.
Maximus. And it talks about the golden albatross, and that albatross is the pension. It talks about, is the pension really worth it? And he was in the military, and he struggled with the idea of holding on and holding out for that pension. And then he found himself into a precarious situation. He ended up getting his retirement, but he wrote a book about the golden arbitrage, which is your pension, and he addressed the whole entire where pensions are a thing of the past,
hmm
and those who have them should really be thankful. But also, is it really worth the squeeze? So if you do things right, which none of us did, we all partied, we all had fun, I'm not going to say none of us, but I'm going to say the majority of us.
Right, right. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. And that's a great title for it, the Golden Albatross, because you know, all you got to do is wake up every day. And that's hard for some veterans, right, after service, because they've lost their mission and purpose, and they struggle with mental health. I know I do. I work at it every day. And it's not just from my time in service. There was stuff that happened when I'm growing up, but like we said before, we've learned to compartmentalize and just put that stuff in the boxes. But after you transition and you're done with the Navy, you got to start kind of unpacking some of that stuff, for your long-term mental health. And how you do that, there's no right or wrong answer. You know, you talk to a professional. There's apps out there for it. The VA has come a long way. The VA is a fantastic organization, and they have tons of resources to help you. So, yeah, you got to unpack those boxes that you packed away and tucked up on the shelf.
I
Jesse,
about it. I kind of talk about your ship. You're a ship, right? And you're in the ocean, which is life. And what you're talking about is compartmentalizing all of your stuff. Well, think about it. The compartmentalization is filling up a void. And if you just keep sticking that down in your holes, eventually you're going to end up sinking. So don't start unpacking it and realize that, hey, there's no stigmatization to take care of yourself. Like, get rid of that whole entire thought. Taking care of yourself should be done sooner than later. Don't wait to talk to somebody, because really mental health is just having somebody to start talking to and working these things out. They're not gonna know unless you give the Navy diagnosis of something. That doctor that you're talking to can't do anything. Like, won't, like, they will listen to you.
HIPAA.
Yeah. It's something that, like, I wish I would have taken advantage of this stuff sooner, because it's really kind of helped me work out some of the BS that I had while I was in the military.
Absolutely.
That could really affect you physically. And it was affecting me. I know that 100%. Stuff that was going on, being in so much pain all the time, and that whole entire, that stigmatization, man. I thought everybody was looking at me like a POS because I was broke. Like, every time I interact with somebody, I'd have this old voice in my head saying, "Oh, that's just that lame senior chief that's just lame."
Yeah. Well, we're always tougher on ourselves than anybody else could ever be, so it's that little voice in your head like, hey, you're junk. Like, you're broken, and everybody knows it, and you're letting everybody down if you go do something about it. But it's a word that I've been using quite a lot this past year, is grace, right? You got to give yourself some grace, because I think those of us with higher EQs, we give everybody grace except ourselves, so take care of what you need to, and get seen for stuff. I think one of the issues with that, though, is it's not really well talked about and advertised. And even if a young sailor says, I've got some mental health issues, the problem these days is there's not enough mental health professionals to take care of everybody that has an issue. So that's where us as senior enlisted leaders, we should be filling that gap. Now, are we professionals when it comes to it? No. But have we seen a thing or two? Absolutely. One of the most successful things I implemented was fully conducting CDBs. It wasn't just a check in the block for me, right? I wanted to do the best possible CDB, career development board, that I could possibly do every time I sat down and did one. So I would block off my calendar, for 2 hours. I wanted to do 2-hour CDBs, if at all possible. Now, did every sailor want to do a 2-hour CDB with their chief? No, but I afforded them that opportunity. But I would get into everything. It's a career development board, but it's, I looked at it as life development. Let's talk about what's going on with you and your family. What's going on with you, shipmate? How are you doing? What's going on? What are the head herders that you have? And I think that I did a pretty decent job of being open and honest with sailors, whether they were, working under me, my peers in the mess, or, you know, the officers in the wardroom, you know, I think I did a pretty good job of being approachable. And that's the key, right? Being approachable so that your sailors will come talk to you with the problem.
You know, and what was really great about CDBs, man, is
Go downstairs, please.
giving these guys like an assignment. I always had something called navigation charts that I always had them fill out. I went really kind of cheesy on it. I called it navigation charts, and they had to have waypoints. And then I had a whole entire speech. I'm like, how do you know where you're going to go? And they're like, well, I don't want to be in the Navy. I'm like, that's a great thing about a navigation chart. I'm not talking about just the Navy. I'm talking about where do you want to be at when you get out of the military? Where do you want to be at in 5, 10, 20 years? Like, I want to see how you're working your 5-year goals to achieve your 10-year goals to achieve your 20-year goals. And these navigation charts, I'd make them fill out. And this one kid, he was kind of difficult. He didn't want to do it. Not at all. He would fight me on it. Like, and he didn't tell me, no, I'm not going to do it. No, he just like put half ass into it. I mean, quarter ass maybe. And he's like, I want to be a photographer. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what do you want to do? Like, you want to go work at a high school newspaper, or you want to work at Vogue magazine? He's like, oh, I'd love to work at Vogue magazine. Never even thought about that. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, man. You're thinking small time.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, I get it. You're a PAO here, and everybody knows that the public assistant, liaison officer assistant that takes the photos isn't really a big deal, but that's where you got to start to get to the big deal part. You got to do the work to get to the big deal part. So it was just really cool. That's what at least that's what I did. I named it. I coined the name.
Yeah. Navigation chart. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
If anybody's interested, you can go to chartyourfi.com and find kind of like a scale of what I did for that. I kind of I put a pin in that, but one day I do plan on publicizing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You bring up a good point for people that are transitioning, and this is more directed at the people that do 20 years or more, right? And it doesn't matter if you're an E6, you get out at 20, you're a E9 that gets out at, 25 or 30, or you're an 06. I think that people need to start having some realistic expectations on what their, next salary is going to be. When I was with the company I was with after I got out of the Navy, I talked to hundreds of veterans. And well, I'm a, 05 that commanded a submarine. I'm going to get out and I'm going to, I need to make $180,000. And I'm like, let's reset your expectations here a little bit, right? Yes, you might have commanded a ballistic missile submarine and done all sorts of crazy stuff and been responsible for, billions of dollars worth of equipment. But guess what? Corporate world is completely different. And I always tried to work it in reverse. And what I mean by that is I'm like, well, how much do you need to take care of you and your family? Well, I need 180,000. Well, what do the pay scales are published. I can see what an 06 or 05, with 25 years, I can see what your retirement pay is. The unknown is your VA disability. So you never count on that. But yes, babe.
We're playing a game. Would you like to play?
I will come down when I'm done with this, okay?
Which color is it?
Red.
Okay.
Playing Blockus.
Oh, yeah. I love it, man.
Family games,
I'm only laughing because it's usually me. Yogi can attest to this. So my wife took the kids to football practice and dropped off the girl over at a friend's house to stay the night. I'm telling you, man, it's usually me. I'm usually like running over there because they're fighting or something. I'm like, hey, like, you guys need to like stop fighting. and I'm trying to record.
Yeah. Well, it's a blessing,
hear
right?
that.
Like I'm so thankful for it. Being able to do that, and since I'm kind of adrift right now, and what I mean by that is, I don't have a job I'm pursuing. I'm not pursuing any education. Um, I got riffed at the end of June, which was one day. So I got riffed on my anniversary for retiring from the Navy, and it was about to be my 1 year anniversary with that company. But stuff happens. Corporate world is a corporate world, and a startup is a startup. It's lots of learning curves there. But yeah, now I'm just kind of hanging out. So my first 2 weeks after that happened it was a lot to process, and I really had some dark days, but I've got a great support system. I've got my wife, I've got my brother down in Texas, and I have, of course, all the sailors that I served with, and I really make a concerted effort, and I have for about the past 5 years. Usually on like a Friday or a Saturday, I'll just, I think I'm up to like, I don't know, 1,600 contacts in my phone, something ridiculous. Some of them are duplicates or whatever, but I'll just scroll through there and find some sailor that I served with that I haven't talked to for a while, and I'll just call, just like, hey, checking in. It's always interesting to see the reactions when I check in. Um, you know, I think people think that people only call them if they need something.
Yeah.
So I just called to say hi, see how you're doing, check in on you. And thankfully, I haven't had too many where I called and they were in dire straits, but I have had a couple. And they're like, man, I really needed to talk to somebody today. I'm glad you called me. So doing that buddy check is an important thing while you're still in, and then definitely after you transition. Because telling your story or just talking to a brother or sister or, fellow sailor or fellow service member, it's cathartic, right? You have that shared history of service, and you can just, you just fall right back in. I've called guys before that I hadn't talked to in like 5 or 6 years, and you just pick up right where you left off, and joke and enjoy a good conversation with somebody that's been in your shoes. But yeah, I mean, transition is tough, and like I said at the beginning of this, it's an ongoing thing. I don't think you fully transition out of the service until, like I said, they put you in the dirt. But there are things that you can do to set yourself up. Obviously, TAP's a requirement. Taking care of your medical, we kind of covered. Networking.
Can you define what networking is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So networking is just building a network of people and resources to support you for whatever you endeavor to do. So I wanted to get into the data center industry when I transitioned. And so I used LinkedIn like a champ. I just started reading every day and spending time on there and reaching out to people for informational interviews. Just, hey, what does this role in the data center industry do? And the way that I approached it is I looked for other veterans that were in that industry that I wanted to be in. Doesn't mean that I solely stuck to veterans, because you can't. There's just not enough people in the data center industry that are veterans that you could just have a complete veteran network. But I started reaching out to people, asking questions, taking Teams and Zoom meetings, and just, having conversations. People are real happy to talk about what they do and to help you when you're transitioning. You just got to put yourself out there, right? You got to be vulnerable, you got to be authentic, and you got to put in the work. It's like that little sign right there behind you, Yogi. Don't wish for it, work for it, right? Nothing comes, and just falls in your lap. You have to, even though I had a little bit easier of a transition, I had to work for it, right? Like, I started in the pandemic. So, 2021, we'd been dealing with COVID for over a year, and things had started to open up. And I'm a guy that's traveled the world, right? Like, I've completely circumnavigated the globe in a P3 Orion 4 separate times, like flown completely around the earth in an airplane. But when I went to go to this conference down in Texas after COVID, it had been, what a wild time, right? The world was in lockdown. Anxiety was increased during that time. I was anxious when I went down there, and for a guy that's traveled the world and been to third world countries and other countries around, just going to Texas from Tennessee, it felt pretty stressful. And then being around crowds after, like I said before, working remote for 2 years and being on lockdown during COVID, it was an anxious time, but I had to put in the work, right? I had to go out, I had to make those connections, I had to see what it was all about. So don't let the fear of something stop you from working towards it. But yeah, I think, transition is an ongoing thing. Obviously, Chris knows that. Your situation, Yogi, is an ongoing thing, it's like the longest transition I've ever experienced. And
Yeah.
I get anxiety for you, man.
I feel like Yogi just keeps finding every single speed bump that's out there. He's like, oh, I want to go. Yeah, I know, man.
He'll get there.
What you were talking about earlier about calling and doing buddy checks, I've been doing that a lot more, and I feel when I was in, man, it was just like it's really hard to do the buddy checks mentally because you're focused on the mission, and then when you're home, you're focused on your family, and then you're back on the mission, and then family, and it's just like I did not keep up well with all my contacts, and I find myself with a very similar situation that you're in. Not all of them are duplicates, but like you have this whole entire contact list. And one of our guests, Jim, he came on and he said that contact list is not just valuable it's not valuable monetarily, it's valuable because of all the relationships that it represents. And those relationships is all the little impacts that you've had over time. So kind of going back and talking to these people and texting them and saying, hey, I retired and I'm just thinking about you. Thanks for being part of my life. I've been calling tons of people up. I just had a conversation with a guy I was with in Guantanamo Bay back in 2008, and we haven't really talked to each other like over a phone since 2008. But it was like we got sucked right back to Cuba. We were joking, having a good time, catching up. It was like there's no lost time, and that's the relationship that we built. Is that kind of relationship. So yeah, absolutely. We should be calling the people on our list and talking to people.
Well, and then I'll tell you, because you're going to experience this probably. So like I said, I've been doing that for about 5 years, right? And I bet you I've only been reached out to by maybe 2-3 people in that time. And so I got to a point probably about, I don't know, 18 months ago. I was like, why do I even do this? Like, and you have to tell yourself, it's not about you, man. It's about the relationship, and it's about helping others. And so just keep after it. You'll get to that point though, where you're like, man, nobody ever calls me. Nobody ever checks on me. Like I said at the beginning of the call, it's fortuitous that we're doing this today because it's selection day. It's go time. we're making new chiefs today. The list came out. Official list will be out tomorrow. But that date, when it comes around every year, that lets you know what kind of impact you had on other sailors, because you're either going to get a call from a sailor that you worked for or you're not, or worked with. So, I got 2 calls today. I felt pretty good about that. And oh, I thought that was my daughter. It's the dog.
Oh, I thought it was your daughter too.
I did too. Barkley.
Sorry, my dogs are doing the same thing back there, man. And while we're recording, I just got a message from one right now and trying to hit me up.
Yeah.
And that is the most magical feeling. It's like Christmas every time.
Yeah, it is.
Seeing your sailors succeed and realizing that their success, you had a part in that.
Mm-hmm.
You had a part in that. You were able to give them something, and they took that and they ran with it. Now, don't let me down, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, things change, and that's one of the hardest things to deal with as a human being is change, and being a sailor, it's no different, right? But you really have to, in order to be a good sailor, you have to embrace change when it comes. And I think I saw that during my season where, I was requesting charges from people outside my area, right? So how do you get a charge from somebody? Well, they email it, right? And then, your local mess there opens your charge book and it's like, what is this? It's not handwritten, it's typed. Look, change happened. You either embrace it or you get left behind. But today's a good day. I'm glad.
Flash forward in a couple of years, man, it'll be tablets and those things.
Yeah. Totally
not a
true.
stone tablet.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, but I think when Yogi asked me to do this, we had no idea what the date was going to be when the names would come out. So
exactly,
the fact that it fell on today is pretty cool.
Completely arbitrary, especially because they've been late for the last 2 years, 3 years.
3 years, yeah. And then heck, I didn't even know till this afternoon when pinning was going to be, but it's going to be on the 29th of September. So at least they got it in the right month, right?
Closer, yeah.
Yeah, finally.
And for everybody that does, our listener audience that doesn't know, right? The Chiefs season normally before COVID, you used to get the results earlier, and then September 15, 14 was when the pinning was done, and that was a ritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of the history, part of the legacy. And since COVID happened, because of the changes that had to be done when it came to the selection process, because of the boards that have to happen, they got shifted to the right, and then also because of the notification, and because of the season, and because of all these other things, everything got shifted. So now we're finally shifting back to when it's supposed to happen. And as Jesse was saying, this is a huge moment, because today is very special for all 3 of us. And both of you guys are retired now. I'm still in, right? And
kinda.
But yeah, exactly. That's where I was going with that. And it's crazy because I've always been the guy that was 100% involved in everything. And Jesse, you were here part of it last year, and we dealt with that. But it was very difficult, and I had emotional breakdowns because I went from being the guy that was 100% involved to where I was pushed away at the last minute saying, hey, you can't be a part of anything. And not only am I already going through this whole massive transition, and Chris kind of joked, and you kind of joked that it's the longest transition in life, right? And as funny as that sounds, it super sucks.
Yep.
And we both know about it because at least when you have a retirement date, boom, you're shooting for that, right?
You can plan.
And Je-
You can plan for
yeah,
life.
and Jesse, you've been a part of this. So have you, Chris, and you've seen my hopes be set up so many times to, hey, I got my date, bro. I'm leaving. Oh, I'm not leaving anymore. This just happened, and this just happened. And I want to thank you, Jesse, honestly, because since the moment I met you, um, you've been there for me. You really have. Um, and I know right now, with your whole transition after transition, with everything that happened, things have been a little bit crazier. But I've never felt alone, and that was because you were there too.
Yeah,
So
man.
thank you, thank
Absolutely.
you. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, sometimes people feel that they have to be in the same AOR or the same unit or whatever to make a change. You don't have to anymore.
Mm-mm.
With technology being what it is, just like you said, the buddy calls. I remember um
Yeah, checking on you because, from the moment I met you, we didn't know each other while we served. I was out by the time that I met you. And it goes back to having that higher EQ, right? Um, Empathy quotient. So when I met you on the Argo there at Point Loma, I just knew right away you were a good human being. Um, and you needed somebody that had gone through stuff and that you could lean on. And I'm more than happy to have been that person with you. Chris has been with you. You have a huge support network. And that's what we need transitioning is a support network, man. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, right? And that's one thing that definitely has helped keep me sane is being able to still support veterans, like I supported sailors when I was in. Um, but nobody's more positive than you, Yogi. I mean, you've had quite the life and career, and you don't let it beat you down. And that's what it's about. It's about the power of positivity, right? Norman Vincent Peale, um, power of positive thinking, um, and you do that. Uh, and it's tough. It's not an easy thing. You have to work at it. Um, I can remember before we did that conference out there in San Diego, you had some serious life blows, man. Like, I mean, holy cow, your storage unit getting broken into and all that stuff stolen. I mean, and then it was just one thing after another, and you just kept working at it, right? And you're still working at it. So keep after it, brother. Um, but I will tell you from my own personal experience, um, I wish I would have taken a little bit of time between, but sometimes you just can't, right? Because the goal is to take care of yourself and your family. So you're just like, I gotta have a job. I gotta have a job. But that's why it's so important for you to put in the legwork before you get out so that like I talked about medical, because, you know, it wasn't until I was probably 3 years away from retirement or, the next chapter of my life that I was like, I'm going to put in a VA disability claim. I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm going to get everything documented and I'm going to put it in, right? And so when you get that rating back, whether it's 0%, 10%, 50, 100, that's some additional breathing room, right? So you're getting your pension, you're getting your VA disability pay. Um, and those are tricky waters to navigate because for folks that have combat related injuries, there's combat retired pay. And then, we could do a whole podcast on just VA disability, because there's so many different little paths. I will put this out there for the audience. There is some fantastic groups out on Facebook. And if you're, transitioning out of the service after 20 years, or you're getting out after 4, look up these groups. It's veteran to veteran info on Facebook, right? That's invaluable. It's just a group of veterans that talk about their struggles with their VA disability claims. And like I said, at some point in this podcast, the VA is amazing. Don't ever let anybody tell you that the VA isn't an amazing organization. It's just a beast. You have millions of veterans out there that, use the VA network. And, you're going to have some horror stories, because it's just like any corporation you work for, any job you work, any unit you've been with. There's good leaders and bad leaders, and that extends the VA. But at their core heart of their mission, they want to take care and help veterans. So do your VA disability claim. Like I said, whether you serve 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 20, 30, put it in. Do you know what you're going to get? No. But, talk to a good VSO, a veteran service officer, from the VFW. That's who I used. DAV's good. Wounded Warrior's good. So many different resources. Reach out to anybody that's on this podcast here, and, we'll help you. While I told you at some point in this conversation that I'm kind of adrift, I'm not really working on anything at the moment. I still get calls, from my previous job, from veterans, or from people I served with that know that I, successfully retired and transitioned. And they just, you share your story, you share best practices. But it all starts with, getting everything documented and then putting your claim in. Like I said, even if you get 0%, you're entitled to certain benefits. And as much as I hate to admit it, none of us are getting any younger, right? So all those maladies that you've collected throughout your lifetime, they're only going to get worse for the most part as you get older. So getting it documented, getting in the VA system now, that's important, right? But yeah, that's one thing I love about being a veteran is we're a community, right? We take care of each other. And it's so important to do that. So everybody do a buddy check-in this weekend with somebody you haven't talked to, and just keep looking out for each other. That's the most important thing.
I want to highlight the fact that you mentioned that you wish you would have spent some time to decompress after your transition, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I know your story, and we've talked about it a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but you were active duty, you were doing your thing, and then you transitioned immediately into the workforce, right? And
Yeah.
now, recently, you're like, man, you say the address part, because you, after what, 26 years, you haven't had that. You've been working consistently for 26 years.
Yeah,
right?
except for the time that I was in DEP. I DEP'd in September 2001, right? That's when I went into DEP, and then I shipped in November. So that's the only time that I haven't had an actual job or a mission or a purpose, from the time that I was 16. So yeah, 26 years, it's a long time to work, right? But yeah, so I wish I would have taken a little bit of time, but I just couldn't, because I had a family to support, and I didn't know what I was going to get VA disability wise. I didn't know if I was going to be 0%, 50%, 100%. I just made sure everything was documented, worked with a good VSO, and sent it off. And so then when that rating came back, that was breathing room, because that's, additional money, and, it covers the gap from, your pension, which is only your base pay, right? Like those of us that serve 20 years, we've collected a lot of different pays potentially, C pay, sub pay. I got flight pay. So there's different pays, and then, you get your basic allowance for housing. That's a huge chunk of change. You get your money for sustenance, BAS, every month. So all that adds up. But, that's a misnomer among civilians, is they're like, well, you get 50% of your pay. Well, no, I get 50% of my base pay.
Base pay.
Not all my special pay and allowances. So that's a big difference, because when I got out, I was making almost 100,000, gross as a chief, between my flight pay and, longevity pay raises and all that sort of stuff. So it's a big chunk of change. And then when you look at the base pay, and you're only getting 50% of that, you're not coming close to 100,000, right? So I had to fill that gap. So I just kept churning and working. But that's why I said at the beginning, everybody's transition is different, right? Only you know your circumstances. But you're not going to figure it out magically on your own. I didn't figure it out magically on my own. I talked to other people that had gone before me. Other people that had successfully transitioned, other people that didn't successfully transition, that had, tragic circumstances, and you try to learn everything you can. And like I said, choose your own adventure, right? How am I going to do it? But yes, I wish I would have taken some time off, but I'm getting that now, but it took me a little while to adjust to it, because you're conditioned to just run your cycles. You're just like, I gotta work, I gotta do a mission, I gotta, have a purpose. And just kind of embracing the calm. It was tough for that first 2 weeks. And, we're only, now I'm 4, 5, about 6 weeks into this. First 2 weeks were rough. But, now I'm kind of, embracing it. Today was my daughter's first day at kindergarten. Fantastic. So now that she's back in school, I'll be able to kind of get back on that horse and, pursue some more education. I'm a big fan of certifications, so there's a couple that I'm going to do. Not a huge fan of institutional education like college, but that's a topic for probably another podcast. But yeah, so I'm reading. I need to do better with my own personal health, and not be so sedentary. I've kind of taken a couple weeks and just I did a lot of reading, which is something that I love to do. I've been binge watched a couple shows. I think today I watched 3 episodes of Gold Rush, just because I think that's interesting, But I'm just kind of embracing the calm, as we'll call it. And I wish I would have done that, but I couldn't at the time. So I'm blessed to be able to have that opportunity to do it now. And I'm so thankful for my wife, because as I was transitioning, she's like, hey, I want to get back into the workforce, because she had been off for COVID. She moved with us, obviously, here to Millington, and she, transferred with the company she was with to Memphis, but it wasn't a good fit. And so she resigned from that position right before COVID hit. And so that was tough for her, but also a blessing too, because our daughter was only 1 when we got here, so she was able to spend all that valuable time with her and enjoy it. But like I said, when I told her that I was getting out, she was like, well, I'm going to go back to work, because there was that fear of the unknown. Like, we didn't know exactly what we were going to be bringing in every month. So she's and she loves working, and she's a kick-ass designer, so she got right back into it. And so between her new position that she's had for over a year now, and my retirement, and then my disability, we're taken care of. But that also brings up another good point that's probably a whole conversation for another podcast, but I'll touch on it a little bit, is when do you know that you've arrived? And by arrived, I mean, when are you content? When are you and your family content? Is it when you're, bringing in $250,000 a year? Is it when you're able to have, a house paid for, or what does success and contentment look like? And it's going to be different for everybody. For me, I'm pretty content now, but at the same time, we're looking to change locations to be closer to family, and that's a whole nother project, right? Like, either renting this house out or selling it and going somewhere else. But getting back to it, what does arriving or success look like? And it's going to be different for everybody. But I think in today's society, I think we're over conditioned that success means, monetary wealth. Sometimes you just need to, kind of go full stop and just look at where you're at. Like, I have a roof over my head. I have a beautiful family. We're all healthy. We have food in the refrigerator. We have vehicles to get us around. We have technology. Like, to me, that's successful. Like, I feel pretty good about where I'm at. But I think people are over conditioned today to think, oh yeah, I should be a YouTube star and making, millions of dollars. You don't need that. And you need to take care of yourself, your family, your brothers and sisters in your community, and your fellow human beings. And to me, that's success. So getting there has been quite the journey, but I'm not saying that I've arrived, because I'm going to keep doing something. I just don't know exactly what it is yet, and that's okay. That's okay. Being able to say that that's okay. It's been a journey to get to that point, but yeah, you're going to be okay too, Yogi. It's just, we got to get you down that red carpet, man. Got to get you down the red carpet.
I think one thing that people could kind of look at, because that's one thing that I always deal with, is being content is something that's really hard for us, especially result-oriented people.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get the results and then we're like, what's next? Just keep going, keep going. And that's why we need to sit down and actually write down on a piece of paper, what do we expect our lives to look at? And we mentioned Reboot earlier. That's one really amazing part about Reboot, is they have you do your visual boards that you talk about where you want your life to be at. And these courses help you understand, well, this is what I want. Well, if you identify what your expectations are and what your goals are, that's one way. And there's other things, for us faith-based people, we got to put our faith where it belongs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And realize that sometimes we're just not going to be able to achieve every single thing that we want. And that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's absolutely okay. And I have a love-hate with technology and, information and AI and machine learning and augmented reality. I think those are all great, fantastic tools, right? But just like anything that has great power, you have a great responsibility to use it effectively. And, it's just evolved so rapidly in the past 25 years that nobody knew where we were going, or had a roadmap on how to get there. One of the biggest things I see today is, social media influencing young people. Like, there are studies out there where a fully developed brain probably shouldn't have the social media that we have, right? Yet alone, a young mind, a young developing mind should not have access to that kind of stuff. Um, you know, but like many things I've said, it's probably a whole topic for another another full episode. But
Oh yeah. You know, let's I I think we should go into the final round, man, because this is going to turn into a 3 hour
yeah,
episode. Yeah.
yeah.
Give me 1 second. I think we have a guest that's popping in here.
Oh shoot.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. I think it's a brother from another mother, or maybe he didn't want to join. Is he in here? Let's see. Hold on.
He's connecting.
Yeah, Nooch is connecting. Okay, so Nooch. Do you know Nooch?
I mean, that sounds like a nickname, so it's hard for me to say, man.
I don't know. You would probably recognize the nickname. Anyway, so let's go ahead and kick off the final round. Nooch will probably join in here. He's one of our hosts.
Oh, nice.
That's going to be partaking in some of our stuff. So thanks, Nooch, for joining. All right. So, first question, man. I know you talked about some Facebook groups, but what is some content that people should be looking at, podcasts or books, while they're in transition?
You mean to specifically help with transition, or
Honestly, any aspect of your life, but we do talk about transition in here. So if you know
yeah.
one that helps you out with yours, that's good.
Really, it's just about get on the VA website, download the VA apps, learn about all the different things that you're going to need to do. Set up your timelines for, getting your new ID cards, transitioning your healthcare over. That's if you've, done 20 years and you do that. But there's stuff for if you only serve 2 years too. So the VA website and, digesting all that stuff. There's so many programs out there. There's that the VA offers. It's just like when you're active duty, there's so many opportunities for you, right? Like the Navy gives you every opportunity to be successful. It's about how you embrace it. So there's not one specific thing besides the VA website that comes to my mind, besides some of those Facebook groups or, some LinkedIn groups or people that are on LinkedIn. So I hope that answers your question. That was the biggest thing for me, was just embracing all the information that the VA has and digesting it, because it's a lot, like thousands of pages of stuff.
The VA also has a ton of, they do have podcasts that are out there and YouTube channels, and there's a lot of information they do put out. They do try their best. The VA, we don't like to talk bad about VA. What we like to talk about is that VA doesn't get enough support.
Absolutely.
And some of the features that they try to come out with, it just doesn't always work. It's just how.
Well, I mean, the Navy does that too. Remember 5-vector model?
Yeah. I do remember that 5-vector model.
Oh, man.
That was so much fun.
Yeah. So what do you got next for me? What's the next head herder?
I'm next. Dun, 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 dun. All right. So you had a really big life, right? And normally the questions that I would ask are, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self before you join the military? And then what advice and when would you give yourself advice to start the transition, right? You talked about started 2 years before your whole transition, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hoarder of information, so I probably started collecting some stuff before that. But yeah, I dedicated myself to it probably 2 years before, just slowly working on different things.
So with that, right, what advice would you give yourself before you join the military? And then what advice would you give yourself before you transition out of the military? And then you are, like you mentioned, you're a year after the military. What advice would you give yourself as you close the chapter on the military? Those are the three questions that I have for you.
Okay, so let's start with the first one. What advice would I give my 18-year-old self? Well, I didn't join at 18. I joined at 22. So the advice I would give to my 22-year-old self would be to utilize the resources that the military has to deal with some of those mental health things that happened in my early life sooner. I wouldn't have waited until I transitioned to deal with some of those things. Those are some dark boxes that I put away. So I would have dealt with that a little bit more effectively before I came in and not compartmentalized it so much. So then the second question was, what advice would I give myself transitioning?
Before you transitioned out, and how early?
Yeah, I would have tried to pay down a little bit more debt earlier. I probably would have tried to do that 4 years earlier rather than 2 years earlier. I would have doubled the time on that. I would have, worked harder at saving money or paying down debt. I also would have started my professional networking earlier, but that's kind of a double-edged sword, and it still is, right? Like, that's the hardest thing for any transitioning service member to answer, in my experience, is what do you want to do when you grow up, right? That's why we joke about it like that. So I would have tried to find something that I wanted to focus on a little bit sooner. Although I had a good 8 months to focus on the data center environment before I transitioned. But if I would have known, but the data center industry is like a whole hidden subset of industry out there. I would say probably 80% of people fall into it. And that's how I fell into it. I didn't know anything about it. And so I would have worked on what I wanted to do sooner, if that makes sense. And then what was the third question? What advice would I have that I'm here out?
Right.
Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Nobody has it all figured out. Certainly not me. I feel very blessed to be where I'm at in my life. Lucky as well. But give yourself grace, whether you transition successfully, whether you're struggling, or whether you completely failed at it. Give yourself grace and, talk about what's going on. There are people out there that want to help you. They're your brothers and sisters that you served with, organizations, so many veteran organizations. I think I sent you my veteran resource list. But if I haven't,
I think a while back, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But we can tag that onto this podcast.
Yeah,
so
it's one that I cobbled together. And so, I think one of the things that makes it hard for us to ask for help is we're conditioned to not ask for help, right? For the most part. I don't think the Navy has done a particularly good job of preparing us to be good leaders until you reach that senior enlisted part, because it's always about, like, you have to be the best So you have to be the #1 EP, you have to be Sailor of the Year, whatever. So, we're not conditioned to ask for help. We're conditioned to be #1 or always striving towards it. So, yeah. And people, they don't want to share their vulnerabilities. They don't want to, let people know that, hey, I'm human. I have weaknesses. I have problems. I have issues. Um, we always want to be seen as like the, ultimate warrior, right? The war fighter that there's no chink in our armor. So when you're vulnerable and you ask for help, that's contrary to that. So it's important though, right? In my opinion.
It's funny because a lot of us think that way, that's like so important that we don't ask for help and we have all the answers and we do all the right things. And why is it that we later on realize that, hey, we are fallible? We're taught that over and over and over again. It's our anchor's fouled.
Yep.
And we make mistakes. And by making mistakes, we learn. And what you're talking about is absolutely right. People are afraid to even take action on doing things because they're afraid that they're going to make a mistake, be seen as an idiot, be seen as not knowing what they're doing because they made a mistake. Oh, I say get out there and make as many mistakes as you can because that means you're actually out there trying to do it. Not obviously go out there and be malicious about it. What I'm talking about is going out there and putting yourself out there to do things that you're not comfortable in.
Yep. I call it failing forward, right? So you go out there, you fail, but you move forward and you learn from the mistakes that you made or, the errors that you had, and then you readjust course, get back on track. So, yeah, I would say asking for help is an important thing. But who am I? I'm just some guy out here in cyberspace, right? But I want to help. So if anybody listening to this, needs somebody to talk to, give me a shout. I might not have the answer, but I can point you in a direction that will probably get you that answer that you need.
I have a question about mindset, man. How did you get into the correct mindset? And I know you were talking about how you were already teleworking before you got out, but what over the last year, what has really helped you get into the correct mindset?
I don't know if I am in the correct mindset, to be quite frank with you. I just know that I'm at peace. So to get into the peaceful mindset, I've just decided that, not having a purpose and mission is okay. You can just relax for a little while. But like I said, my daughter started back to school today. So I'll have more time. Did I do anything purposeful today? Not really. Today was a pretty relaxed day. I just, did the normal stuff around the house, took care of the animals, did a little reading, watched a little television. So that mindset of peace, though, I'm content. It goes back to what I talked about with when do you know you've arrived or when are you successful. I think when you're able to just relax and be content with who you are and where you're at in life, I think that's when you've arrived. But that probably doesn't answer your question as far as mindset. But that's just kind of where I'm at. I'm not in the right mindset in my mind because I'm not really moving forward, but that goes contrary to being content. So I'm just like taking a reset and yeah, I think probably within the next couple months I'll be more moving forward towards a goal. But right now I'm just, going to upskill, catch up on my reading, take care of my family, take care of myself. but I need to action some of the stuff that I've already identified, right? Like I'm way more sedentary than I've ever been. And so, I have an exercise bike in the corner. I need to get on that thing, because it's freaking 90 degrees during the day. I don't feel like going out running or walking in the neighborhood when it's 90 degrees, but I have that thing. I just don't use it. So I just need to force myself into changing my habits and that sort of thing. So that mindset is going to be important. I know what I need to do. We usually do. It's the matter of actually doing it. Yeah.
I think you said your mindset a couple times. Grace. You're in a mindset of grace.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did I arrive at that point? Well, it wasn't easy. Let me tell you. But once I realized that, bills are paid, we're healthy, my wife's happy, I'm like, okay, I can have some grace because I'm not in fight or flight mode, right? I'm not in fight mode to find a job. I'm not in flight mode where, I need to, get out of a bad job or get out of a bad situation. I just, just kind of being for the time being and checking on my brothers and sisters and taking time to do things like this. And yeah, I'm okay with it.
So Jesse, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
I'd say the easiest way is just to find me on LinkedIn. As long as you're not some crazy, salesman or, somebody trying to sell me something, I reply to every message I get on LinkedIn. So Jesse Kendrick, I haven't even looked to see if, let me look on there real quick. I think I'm hard to find on there for some reason. It's probably just all my old tactics coming back. I lock everything down, but let's see. And it looks like they've kind of changed. Well, no, they didn't. Here. So not that they'll be able to see that. Maybe they will be.
There you go. Yeah.
When I came up here to do detailing, I knew everybody knew that I was going to be a detailer. So I actually changed my number that I had for 17 years. And then COVID hit. I was working from home, so everybody got my new number anyway. So I'm not afraid to put my phone number out there. If you're a veteran, military spouse, that just need somebody to talk to or need some ideas or need some resources, you can call me on my cell, 901-279-3277. Leave a message if I don't answer, shoot me a text. I'll get back to you when I can because, life happens. I might be out, taking the dogs out or taking my daughter to school, but I'm happy to have a conversation and talk with you about whatever you need.
Or been watching the Gold Rush.
Oh, yeah. I might. Yeah. Don't interrupt my Gold Rush time.
So with that, Jesse, it's an honor to know you. I say that from the bottom of my heart. And
likewise, my friend.
You a friend and a brother. And thank you for coming onto the podcast. We would love to bring you back whenever you feel that is the right time.
I mean, it's always the right time for me. I mean, but this next time, why don't you guys steer it a little bit more? I feel like we all kind of steered it today, and there was lots of topics where we could have went down on a tangent. But yeah, if you tell me what you want to discuss, I'm more than happy to come back on. It's been my pleasure and my honor to be on here with you guys, and you guys are so dedicated to the veteran community, especially there in San Diego, which has a huge presence. I really respect and appreciate what you guys do for the community because, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to do this stuff, right? It's not easy. You're taking your time, your efforts, and, none of this equipment's free. So, you got to cover that. But no, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm happy to come on anytime, any topic you guys want to talk about. Um, you know, even politics or religion, I'll touch those on a podcast, but I don't usually do that at home or at work. But whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to do it.
We do allow our guest hosts to really run how the podcast goes, because it's not Yogi and Chris's podcast. It's actually our guests that we bring on. It's
Sure.
listeners' podcast. So we really do appreciate you guys coming on here, and we wouldn't even have a show if it wasn't for you, Jesse, or Nooch, or Amy, or Mark, or everybody that's come onto our show and made it be what it is. And it's not just Yogi and I anymore. Now we have a whole entire team that's actually with
it's awesome.
admin and helping with the editing and stepping in whenever one of us has to go take care of things. Like it's turning into something great, man. And it was forged out of something painful.
Mm-hmm. That's how a lot of good things are birthed, out of tragedy, out of adverse conditions. And, I'm glad to hear this is no different. And your purpose and your mission for doing it is pure and good. And let me know if you need anything, brother. I know you're just on the other side. That's why you got the chin hair grown out. It'll itch here eventually, and you'll shave it off.
So before I give a shout out to this, I want everybody to kind of rewind and listen to what Jesse put out there. He served our country. He was a Navy chief, air crewman. He talks about his transition time frame. He talked about leaving the Navy during the COVID era and how it really kind of helped him transition a little bit, but still everybody's transition is different. So please take a listen to this. We talked about how medical stigmas, we talked about mental stigmas. We talked about a bunch of different stuff in here. So please take a listen to it. Jesse's got a lot of knowledge on here, and his bottom line, his message is have grace for yourself. So we are sponsoring a football team, and it just happens to be my son's football team. So Snohomish Panthers, we are rooting for you guys. Now, for everybody else, our listeners, it is your transition. So take charge of it. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. Mil2Vet out. Hey, bear with me. I'm making myself a nice iced latte. Okay.
You're all good, man.
You see that the allergic reaction he has in his face?
Well, I thought it was pretty cool that today was selection day.
Yeah.
So I got 2 phone calls. That's always nice when you get a couple calls.
Yeah.